57. That's the number of Scottish seats up for grabs on July the 4th. While the number dwarves the sum total of what's at stake in the House of Commons, Labour have made one thing abundantly clear. The path to victory runs through Scotland. Their leader, Sir Keir Starmer, is in Scotland for the second time in a week, and he joins me now. A very good morning to you, and thank you for being with us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on.
Well, we're talking about the economy this morning, and you want to talk about your plans for GB Energy, which you say will turn the page on the cost of living crisis. How will GB Energy work in practice?
Well, GB Energy is a company that we will set up if we are privileged enough to come into power. It'll be a publicly owned company, so owned by the taxpayer, making money for the taxpayer, and it'll invest in clean power of the future. So as we transition into clean power, I think there's the potential for a huge number of well-paid, skilled, long-term jobs in renewable energy, and GB Energy will effectively be the vehicle for that, the driver of that, to make sure that those jobs are here in Scotland rather than in other countries. In Europe, in America, initiatives are already underway to try and get ahead of the game on renewables. I want Scotland, I want the UK to be in the race. And so GB Energy will be set up, a publicly owned company, and we will base it in Scotland because it's so important, obviously, in terms of renewables, the energy sector in Scotland. And so this publicly owned company will be set up very quickly if we're privileged enough to come into power. And we will base it right here in Scotland.
It will generate its own energy then, generate rather than buy up from the market and resell, essentially.
Yeah, it's an investment vehicle, so it will invest in the jobs of the future, and therefore, where public money is put into that investment, and there is yield from it, it'll come back to the taxpayer, but it'll also be a vehicle to make sure that the private sector comes in and invests alongside GB Energy. So it has those sort of two purposes, if you like. But it is actually an exciting project to ensure that thousands upon thousands, tens of thousands of jobs in renewable are there for decades to come.
How will it be funded?
Well, it'll be capitalised on borrowing to the tune of about £8 billion. So there'll be a lot of money going into it. That will be used to trigger private investment. So we hope private investment will come in probably on about a ratio of 1 to 3. We've obviously, as you'd expect, Laura, been talking to investors as to how that might work. I've been up to Aberdeen, as you'd expect, spent a few days up there talking to the energy sector about how this would be used. An example would be carbon capture. As you probably know, some of the pipe work up in Glasgow and up in Aberdeen can be used for carbon capture. There's the potential for decades of work there. And I would envisage that GB Energy would be a big driver of that, working with the energy sector.
Can I just clarify, this funding that you would give, who would actually be in ownership then of that infrastructure that you're funding in order for GB Energy to actually generate its own energy? Would this be via local authorities? You talked about private sector involvement too, but I'm just trying to clarify the extent to which it would actually be generating its own electricity, and that would all be publicly owned.
Well, no, it'd be an investment vehicle, so not an energy company. So it's an investment vehicle in the energy of the future. The money going into it would be public money, but used to trigger private investment alongside it.
So it would have to profit. It would still have to work financially, wouldn't it? It would have to make a profit.
Yes, of course, Laura, you're absolutely right. It'd have to work financially. It would make money. I'm convinced it would make money. The great advantage is that when it makes money, that money comes back to the taxpayer, in Scotland, rather than at the moment, as you will well know, where there is development in relation to energy, that simply goes into the energy companies, many of whom
there's also an issue there.
Abroad,
sorry to interrupt.
The money is going abroad.
There's the issue here of the fact that you'd have to decouple the price of green energy from the price of fossil fuels, because that's what's keeping energy prices so high at the moment. Have you any avenue or way of doing that?
Well, we're going to have to review that, of course, because that coupling served a useful purpose. Certainly allowed renewables to sort of ramp up pretty quickly. But renewables in the end will become the dominant source of energy.
Is that within your gift, though, to do that?
Sorry, say that again?
Is that within your gift to do that? Are you capable of doing that then, of decoupling green energy from fossil fuels?
Yes, and we need to review that. As I say, that wasn't. I mean, let me be clear. I'm not critical of the way it has operated up until now, because renewables did need that boost, that sort of security, if you like, of getting into the market and getting established. But we're at a different stage now. If you look at things like floating offshore wind, which could be a real game changer in relation to Scotland. We're on the cusp of a new generation now of wind turbines. I want to see them manufactured here as well, by the way. I went to Whiteley's wind farm, just as you know, just outside Glasgow. Amazing onshore wind farm. But I was pretty horrified to learn that not a single one of the wind turbines at Whiteley's outside Glasgow was made in Scotland.
Made here. Okay, I'm keen to move on. I'm keen to move on to a couple of other things. I'm so sorry to interrupt, but let me just quickly, one last thing on energy. Concerns have been expressed about job losses in the North Sea, about this, if this transition is not done rightly. Also a higher windfall tax as well, being a disincentive to firms who may go abroad. How do you respond to those criticisms from within the industry and from your political opponents?
No, I understand what you're putting to me, and obviously that's among the reasons I went up to Aberdeen to talk directly to the energy sector and, of course, to
the Aberdeen and Grampian Chamber of Commerce are among the people expressing this concern.
Yeah, so, I mean, what I said to them, we're not going to turn the pipes off instantaneously. That's never been part of our plan. We're not going to revoke any licences that are in place. And
but no new licences.
Yeah, but that means that oil and gas will be part of the mix for decades to come. The question is what we do about the transition. And the way, Laura, I see it is, so no turning off of the pipes, no revoking of licences, oil and gas for decades to come as part of the mix. But we have to make the transition. Everybody...
Okay, so you don't think there'll be lots of job losses as a result of that, especially if there's no new licences granted?
Analysis. In fact, I'm absolutely convinced that the transition can bring more jobs to Scotland and jobs that will last for decades.
Okay.
But Laura, just finish by putting it this way. I think a huge mistake was made when coal started coming to an end and the government of the day didn't plan for the future. I'm not prepared to let an incoming Labour government in that position. We have to plan for the future, do the transition properly, and that is the best way to ensure that jobs are there, not just for this generation, but for the next and the generation after that.
Let me move on and ask you, will Diane Abbott be standing for Labour at the general election?
Well, Diane Abbott has had the whip returned to her. No decision has been taken to bar her from standing, and the NEC will come to a decision in due course. She, of course, was a trailblazer for years. She faced many challenges, which she overcame in her political career. And
so would you like her to stand then?
For others to come. Well, ultimately, that'll be a matter for the NEC, but no decision has been taken.
But would you like her? I'm asking if you've just paid tribute to her and her legacy under the Labour Party. Would you like her to stand?
The whip's being returned to her. No decision to bar her, and the NEC will come to a decision in due course. That's the process that we're now in.
There's been some controversy over who's representing Labour in this election. Aside from her, Azia Shaheen was barred from being a Labour candidate for liking a tweet. Josh Simons is a candidate after saying criminal gangs could be sent on a barge north of the border. Meanwhile, though, two Conservatives recently crossed the floor to support you. Another Tory MP yesterday said that he was going to support Labour. Your political candidates political opponents, are making real capital out of this, aren't they? And some might be asking, what is the difference between you and the Tories if so many Conservatives seem to be keen to be joining Labour at the moment?
Oh, there's a massive difference between us and the Tories. Just look at the Tories' terrible record on the economy. I mean, in Scotland, many people listening to this will be paying more on their mortgages because of what Liz Truss did to the economy. That is appalling. And when Rishi Sunak says we've turned the page, everything's fine, anybody listening to this who is now paying hundreds of pounds more, I think the average is about £180 more a month in Scotland on any mortgage, I think they will just feel that, you know, an incoming Labour government that can deliver economic stability and the growth that we need, the new jobs that we need, will be a million miles away from where we are now. On the NHS, we've got, which is one of the things we're unveiling this morning, we've got this plan for 40,000 appointments each and every week in England to deal with the waiting list. That has a consequence, obviously, for Scotland, which means that if it was taken up, would mean 160,000 appointments. Now, we can't, that would have to be working with the Scottish government. I recognise that. But what a big difference that would make to the lives. I think it's 1 in 6 now in Scotland on a waiting list. What a big difference that would make.
One final question. We've been hearing this morning, Donald Trump's been found guilty on 34 counts of falsifying business records. If you are elected Prime Minister and he is returned as US President, would you feel comfortable dealing with Donald Trump?
Well, it is... obviously, we respect the decision of the court, the independent court. There's a bit of process to go with sentencing and appeal, but we are in an unprecedented situation. There's no doubt about that, Laura. Ultimately, whether he's elected president will be a matter for the American people. And obviously, if we're privileged to come in to serve, we would work with whoever they choose as their president. But there's no getting away from the fact, I think. This is a wholly unprecedented situation.
And on the Middle East, would you as Prime Minister follow Spain, Norway and Ireland and formally recognise a Palestinian state?
I do believe in recognising a Palestinian state. That has to be part of the process to a two-state solution so that we can have a viable Palestinian state alongside a safe and secure Israel. So as part of the process, it's long been Labour policy to recognise Palestine.
OK. Sir Keir Starmer, many thanks for your time this morning.